Yeah, good morning. Happy Tuesday. PSW staff, clients, and friends. Join us for, we're going to revisit a composer. Yesterday was a lot of fun, though, with Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. So get that score into me today. It should be kind of an indie-sounding score. Yeah, so, and then next week we're going to have a little bit of a challenge, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Today we're going to revisit it. I think this is the third class that we ever did, so maybe my energy is a little lower, and I think the sound's a little different, but try not to be too distracted, because just pay attention to the content, because we're going to talk about this composer, Philip Glass, and I want to revisit his biography a little bit and some of the pieces that I shared in the class. So we're gonna look at the old class, and we're gonna talk about Philip Glass a little bit more in detail tomorrow. I want you to just listen to, this is the origins of minimalism, repetitive music that goes back to the 50s, 60s. We looked, though, at Colin McPhee, and Colin McPhee was maybe the first minimalist in the 30s. So we did a class on him, and I mentioned a few people in this class you're about to see that we did do classes. So see, I wasn't just lying. Nadia Boulanger, we did a class, maybe the most important musical teacher of the 20th century. Philip Glass studied with her, so pay attention to that when that comes up, because she had Copland study with her. So many great composers, and she was all about the original voice of the composer, right? Because she would say, don't be untrue to yourself, whatever yourself is. And Quincy Jones said she changed everything about how he thought about music, and encouraged your original voice. I liked that. So she was very much like that, because how could you teach Aaron Copland and Philip Glass? Their music sounds nothing alike. But that's the challenge of a teacher. We also, I mentioned Steve Reich in this because he's one of the minimalist composers that we talked about before as well. Glass and Reich started pretty much together at the same time in New York in the 70s with their own style of music. Terry Riley was also one of the first minimalists too. That's in the 60s with his piece In C that we talked about several months ago. So I'm just kind of reviewing composers and certain ideas that we've been talking about. So with Philip Glass, pay attention to just his life story, because it's always interesting to see how these people that we're talking about, how they got to where they're at. So without further ado, let's look at Philip Glass Revisited. So Philip Glass was born in 1937, so he's 83 years old today, and he's a composer and a pianist. And like Stravinsky, really one of the most influential composers of the 20th century. And he's kind of famous for coming up with a term that's called minimalism music, or minimal music. Just like Steve Reich and Terry Riley, other composers that we can talk about later. And minimalism music is kind of music that has repetitive structures, which he's evolved kind of stylistically. And that style really came from him studying with the famous Indian composer Ravi Shankar, where he learned repetitive structures from him and incorporated that into his own music. Now, going back just a few years before he met Ravi, he was at Juilliard School of Music, which is one of the most famous music schools in the world in New York City. Now at Juilliard, although he mastered harmony and tonal and counterpoint and all that stuff, he wasn't writing music that was true to himself, true to what he wanted to do. He didn't really know what he wanted to do, but he knew that he didn't connect with this music, just like the music we're listening to right now, which is by Boulez, who's a genius, composer, conductor, everything, but so not like what Philip Glass was trying to sound like, because to him it just sounded like kind of noise in some ways, in a respectful way. So just to get a timeline, after Juilliard, he went to study with Nadia Boulanger, who was one of the most famous music teachers in the world in Paris. After her, he met Ravi Shankar, so we're kind of going out of order a little bit, but that's okay. Nadia Boulanger really taught him strict classical rules about how a composer should write, and even more so than Juilliard, she kind of told him, forget everything you learned, and we're going to start all over again. And
we're going to find you your true voice as a composer. So this was kind of his sound in the beginning of his own voice, but there's so much music after this era in his life that is so melodic, and he really has so much soul in his music. Let's listen to a few pieces that I think that shows he's not just a mechanical scientist doing music. He's actually has so much sweet soul in his music. That beautiful piece is called Facades, and that's for string ensemble and soprano saxophone. So that's one of my favorites. So I'll leave you with one more before we end this class. This is a beautiful piece for string orchestra, and I hope it enlightens you in some way.
So I hope you enjoyed that intro to Philip Glass that we did years ago. I hope you listen to his life and trajectory, because it's good to know how somebody got to this point. Tomorrow we'll dive into our advanced class about Philip Glass. We're going to look at some Baroque influences and similarities between, so if minimalism, if this was music in the 70s, we're going to see how it goes back to Bach, because it always goes back to Bach. And we're also going to, what our theory is going to be, if maybe he was one of the first film composers to do something very differently that people still do today. Now, we looked at Max Steiner with King Kong. He was big because it had been pre-existing music, because film was in its infancy. But with Steiner, he gave it a real score. We go to Bernard Herrmann, that's Hitchcock. Very great music, orchestral music. In the 60s, we go songs, right? Those are big. 70s, John Williams. And then after that, I think Philip Glass in the 80s and 90s, 2000s, he really creates a new genre that we're going to look at, film scoring genre that people use today for thrillers, psychological movies. So we'll have a lot of fun tomorrow. So there's that. I'll be here tomorrow, and we'll dive in. So have a great rest of the day. See you tomorrow. Bye.